Earlier this week, on January 21st, 2025, the court overseeing this case approved my proposed distribution plan. The court wrote a 20-page decision explaining its ruling in detail. That opinion is linked to on our website at www.EminiFXReceivership.com. In this video, I'd like to talk to EminiFX investors about the amount, the method, and the timing of distributions. Right now, I am announcing a first distribution of $100 million. That's how much I'm setting aside and budgeting to pay all eligible investors in this first distribution. So let's start with how much you will each receive. Now the plan works a little differently for investors who put in more than $1,000 and those investors who deposited $1,000 or less. But either way, for all investors, we're going to look at the total deposits in and the total withdrawals out. Because the court confirmed in its order that EminiFX is a Ponzi scheme, we are not paying based on ROI, bonuses, or internal transfers. So let's start with those who invested more than $1,000. Those investors are going to receive 45% in the first distribution, and they'll be eligible for more distributions later. And we call those Class 3 claimants. Importantly, any distribution is going to be offset by the pre-receivership withdrawals. I think it's helpful to use an example to explain this. So let's say somebody invested $10,000. That person will receive an initial refund of $4,500 because that's 45% of $10,000. Now let's say that person also withdrew $1,000 before EminiFX was shut down and the receivership was started. So that pre-receivership $1,000 withdrawal would be deducted from the $4,500, and that person who deposited $10,000 and who withdrew $1,000 would receive a distribution of $3,500. I'm going to do one more example. Let's say somebody put in $10,000 and withdrew $6,000 pre-receivership. So that means the person would be 45% of $10,000 is $4,500 minus $6,000 would be negative $1,500. Now, if it's negative, we're not asking anybody to put money back in that case, but it does mean that their distribution is zero, and that's because they had withdrawn a substantial amount before EminiFX was shut down. And I'll just say that doesn't affect many users. Only a few hundred out of tens of thousands of investors withdrew enough pre-receivership to not receive a distribution in this first wave of 45%. Now, many of you might be wondering if this is going to be the only distribution. I do expect that there will likely, but not definitely, be additional distributions for Class 3 investors. I cannot distribute all the money now because I need to reserve for taxes. And the reason for that is that our tax laws unfortunately do not allow a receiver to force the IRS to tell me a definitive amount of the taxes that we owe. And so my team and I are doing what we can to expedite the process and to really minimize the amount of payments that we think we'll have to make and to argue for that position with the IRS. But until we have a definitive resolution with the IRS, during which, again, we will be advocating to get that number as low as possible so to help investors out, I need to hold enough for the worst case scenario. And so I'm hoping that once we can resolve the various tax issues, we'll be able to make a future distribution. And in that case, I'll increase the rising tide percentage, and investors who already received a 45% payment will be eligible for an additional supplemental payment. So just to sum up, what this means is that if you deposited more than $1,000, you're getting 45% back now, minus your pre-receivership withdrawals, and with the possibility for more in a future distribution. So let me turn now to those who deposited $1,000 or less. That's almost 25% of all eligible investors, but it's only 2% of deposits. And so what we did is we're going to give those investors a single distribution. That means they're going to be one and done. And so we're calling them Class 3A claimants. But to make up for the fact that those investors only get a single distribution, I am increasing their percentage from 45 to 55%. So they get more in terms of percentage, but they only get one distribution, and that's how we balance everything out. So we'll take another example. A person who deposited $800 would get a 55% distribution, or $440 back. Now let's say that person also withdrew $100 before the receivership. So that $100 would be deducted from the $440, and they would get a total of $340. And so that allows us to avoid making much smaller distributions in the future with small increases in the percentage of the rising tide, and allows us to save a lot of money and not making thousands of small distributions, $50, $20, $30, $10. And those cost savings then we'll put back into the receivership, and those cost savings will be essentially the benefit will go to investors, because we'll save money, and whatever money we save, we're able to pass through to investors. All right, so that's the amount. Now, if you want to see your individual payment, or the individual amount that you're going to get paid, we're going to upload that data to the user portal. By the time you see this, we may have already uploaded it, but keep checking if you log on and you don't see your numbers yet. And we're going to also send you an email. You may have already received it by the time you're seeing this video, which is okay. But that email is going to really summarize some of the information I'm describing here, and it's also going to ask you to go to your user portal and complete some information if you haven't already done so. So I think that's a good segue now to how and when you're getting paid, and why you need to keep going to your portal, and why you need to use that tool that we've created for you. So on that user portal, after you log in, there's a payment information section. And over 15,000 investors have used that to give us payment information, so thank you to those users. If you haven't, that's okay. Please go and log on, and when you do, you'll see that you can receive a payment via electronic method or check. I recommend electronic because it's faster, but the choice is yours. Either way, you provide your details, and then once we have your payment information, we'll be able to make a payment to you. So I want to turn now to the when. And it ties into your payment, providing your payment information. So if we have your payment information by January 31st of this year, so January 31st, 2025, and you're eligible for a distribution, we're going to make those distributions in the first 2 weeks of February. So it's coming very soon for those who have given us payment information. Now, if you haven't given us payment information by January 31st, you don't lose your claim. You still have your claim, you're still eligible for distribution, but because we don't have payment information, we don't have a place to send the payment, which means that we will have to close down the portal for a few days to get the information for those who did and get it all set up to make the payments, and then we'll bring it right back online sometime in the first week or two of February, and then we'll tell everyone, okay, go back on. If you didn't give us your payment information already, you give the payment information then, and once we have that, every month or two, depending on the volume that we're getting, we'll repeat that process where we shut down the payment portal for a few days, take everyone who's given us new payment information, make payments to those investors, and then reopen it to try to get as many people as possible paid because we have their information. I don't want to be in a situation where I'm not paying people, where people don't get their money because they haven't told us where to send it. But no matter what, we're going to save enough money in our distribution that everyone who's eligible will have the money set aside. So we're not going to lose your money, or there's not going to be a situation that some people have raised with me where they say, well, what if some people going to get paid first and then there won't be any money left? No, we have enough for everyone to get this first payment, but you have to give us your information, and that's the only way we can actually make the payment. There are a small percentage, it's maybe 2% of users who have disputed transactions remaining or a review hold. Those users are not yet eligible for payment in this distribution because we need to work those issues out first. Over the next weeks and months, someone from my team will be reaching out to those users to try to resolve that. But again, for those users, we have set aside enough that we will be able to make the payment if that user is eligible once we resolve all the issues. So there's, again, no danger that because we're resolving them, we're going to use everything up on the, no, that's not how it's going to work. We'll have enough money to pay those users too. So when we reach out to resolve the issues, it's really my hope that those affected users will really work with us to get those issues resolved as quickly as possible, because once we do get those issues resolved, if that user is eligible for a payment, we'll be able to process them in the next wave. So don't worry if you've got a hold or a disputed transaction. We will be working with you over the next few months to get those resolved, and we have enough money to pay all those users. You know, I understand that many of you invested in EminiFX on the hope that the 5 to 10% of weekly returns and all the various bonuses were real. And as the court explained in its opinion, which I encourage everyone to read, quote, the gains and bonuses were illusory, end quote, and, quote, EminiFX was a Ponzi scheme that did not generate any actual profits, end quote. The deposits were all pooled together, and individual withdrawals were not paid from profits. Instead, as we've gone over in prior videos, withdrawals were paid from the same pool of money holding all the investor deposits, and that's the same pool of money that I'm using to pay these refunds now. And so that's why we're not paying on ROI and bonuses, but we are looking at the deposits in and the withdrawals out. And on prior videos, I've mentioned the SEC's website, investor.gov. If you've listened to these videos before, you've probably heard me talk about that website, but some people may not have. Some people may be new to this, and this may be their first video, so I want to explain it again. That page has a warning signs for Ponzi schemes, including high returns with little to no risk and overly consistent returns, badges that were very much in this case, as you'll see in the judge's opinion. And so, especially as we are about to make payments, I'd like to encourage everyone, especially if you're watching me on video for the first time, to be cautious not to invest in frauds into schemes, and to look at that page for some tips on how to spot Ponzi schemes and how to be a vigilant and responsible investor in the future. We're going to put a link to that page in the notes to this video right below. And finally, if you have any questions, please email eminifx@stretto.com. You can also call Stretto at 855-228-3721. It's a toll-free US number. If you're international, you can call Stretto at +1-949-407-5078. I'd like to close by saying that the primary goal of my entire team has been to make payments of distributions to investors. And I do know that many of you have been waiting a long time for this. My team and I will continue to work hard to maximize the amount of money we can return to EminiFX investors. Thank you for your time and your patience. Good night.